Today we are going to talk about learning. How do you get someone to learn something? I had to do a presentation a couple weeks back, and I had 40 minutes to teach someone who is not a trainer, not a teacher, not an instructional designer, the bare basic minimum to get people to learn. And what I realized as I went through this, and I just wrote a book actually on instructional design, and so this is a recap from some of the stuff that I even went through in my book. So I've been reflecting on this for a long time, but how do you get someone to learn something? And there are a number of learning taxonomies out there, there are a number of models, but one of the things we miss a lot when we talk about this stuff is that I can give someone the 90% really quick. What does that mean? That means that I can basically show you how to take someone and that knows nothing about being a teacher, trainer, or learning and give them like a very quick and dirty overview of how to get someone to learn. And it will improve their teaching by a significant portion. And then there's all kinds of little things I can do that can keep improving it and improving it. But they don't need to ever get that far. Let me give you an example. And this is what I actually told my audience, because my audience was doctors. I said, you can teach me how to identify the common cold. You can teach me how to identify the cold. And you can put me in a doctor's office today after a 1-hour session, and I can sit there and I can probably identify 90% of the people that come in sick and tell me their symptoms. I can be 90% correct whether they have a cold or not. And then, you know what? There's 10% that I'm going to miss. I'm going to miss the people that have meningitis, bacterial infections, all that kind of stuff. Teaching's the same thing. I can teach someone how to teach and do a really good job like that, get that 90% correct pretty quickly. Because it's not that difficult. It's very simple steps. So let me go through how to do it. All right. So the first thing you got to do is you got to get the learner's attention. You got to motivate them. Why? Why is that important? So let's say, I'm married, me and my wife. Let's say we have an argument in the morning, and then I'm supposed to go take a training session. What's on my mind? The argument with my wife. Or my kid did something in school, and I got to deal with that. That's on my mind. Or I got to pay a bill, or whatever it is. That's on my mind when I go to take this training session. So the first thing you got to do is you got to get your student's head out of the gutter. Take their head out of the gutter. Put their mind focused on the task. How do you do that? Motivate them. Gain their attention. A million different ways to do that, but you got to figure out what's going to work for your training and your students. Maybe you got to tell them a story that motivates them. Maybe you got to show them a video. Maybe you got to slap your hands really loud or something. I don't know. There's a bunch of things you can do, but you've got to motivate your learners. Usually some kind of case story, some kind of game, some way to get their attention is how you have to start. You got to get their mind clear. It's almost like you picture like the Karate Kid when he's like, you've got to focus and meditate and focus on clear your mind of everything else. That's what you're doing. You've got to get them to clear their mind, focus and meditate on the task at hand. All right. Next thing you got to do, tell them what their goals are. What are we going to learn today? A lot of times we use this word, I hear people say, tell the learners the objectives. I never tell the learners the objectives. Objectives are very specific. I tell the learners, look, we're going to learn these 3 things today. There are 3 goals. There might be 7 objectives, but there are 3 main goals. There are 3 main points. What are the main points you are going to learn today? Here's what they are. So I clear their mind, get their attention. I tell them what they're going to learn. Next thing I do, I activate their prior knowledge. I tell them what they already know. Why do I do that? Because I know the way people learn, our mind, you see this cup right here? I can only fill this cup up with so much water or coffee before it starts overflowing. Guess what happens? Your brain is the same way. Your brain is like a cup. Well, not this cup, but your brain is like a cup. And you can only fill it up so much. So I don't want the learners to waste what goes in this cup on things they already know. So I tell them, well, you guys already know this, and this. Today we're going to add to it. You are activating their prior knowledge. Get their mind going. Get those wheels turning. Get that hamster in their head running real fast. Turning that wheel. Okay, so we've done that. So we gained their attention, told them their goals, activated their prior knowledge. Time to teach them. Now we're going to teach them. How do we teach? There are 4 parts that I like to talk about when I teach. 4 different things that you got to do when you teach someone something. 4 things. And I feel like this is the part that I don't hear in a lot of learning taxonomies. These 4 parts. 4 parts to getting someone to learn something. You got to deliver the content. You got to have your learners memorize the content. Your learners have to apply the content. And then your learners have to transfer or problem solve with that content, like apply it to new situations. Then guess what? Your learners have learned it. Maybe your goal isn't to get them to apply or problem solve, so you don't do that. Maybe they just only memorize. But if you're going for that high order knowledge, so it's 4 parts to that get them to learning. So when you're planning your presentation or whatever it is, your worksheet or your activities or whatever you're doing, ask yourself, am I doing these 4 things? Am I delivering the content? So how are you doing that? Maybe it's PowerPoint, maybe it's video, whatever it is. How are you delivering the content? You got to deliver it. Next step, you got to let your learners memorize. How are you letting your learners memorize? If you're just presenting content and there's no memorization happening, no, you're messing up. You got to go back. How are you getting your learners to memorize the content? What are you doing? Is it that they're going to rehearse? Is it they're going to sit there and memorize a list, keep practicing? Are you going to play like a hangman game or Jeopardy? How are you getting them to memorize this content? Next, how are we getting them to apply the content? How are they applying it? Maybe we're using a case study. Maybe we're having them do some kind of activity. And maybe apply and problem solve are all done. Maybe memorize, apply, and problem solve are all done with the same activity. But you have to ask yourself, are they doing these things and how? How are they applying? Through a case study. Well, how are they going to solve a problem? How are they problem solving or applying this to new information? Maybe part of that case study does that too. But you have to ask yourself, are they doing these 4 things? That's how my learners learn. That's how they take it from their working memory to their long-term memory. Oh, I said like front and back, like that. No, that doesn't really, it's not like that. But I'm just using that as an example. Short to long-term. How do you get it in their long-term memory? You present the content, you have them memorize it, you have them apply it, and you have them do something with it, like problem solve, apply it to some new situation. Finally, what do? What's the final step? We review with our learners. We have to evaluate. So we have to evaluate 2 things. We have to evaluate the learners, and then we got to evaluate what we just did ourselves, our instructions. How do we evaluate the learners? We ask the learners, did they like it? Well, first of all, we got to find out, did the learners enjoy this? Maybe your goal was that they didn't. Maybe your goal was that they did. But enjoyment does tell you something. Did my learners like this? And then I've got to ask myself, did the learners learn? So I've got to find out if the learners learned. So I got to find out those 2 things. That's learners. Then evaluate the instruction itself. How do we determine that? Well, what worked, what didn't? What did I like, what didn't I like? So I've got to evaluate this instruction and say, how can I improve this for next time? And then finally, the final thing I got to evaluate is, was it even worth giving the learners this instruction? What was my return on investment? Were they able to apply it to their jobs or their test or whatever it is? Did it work? And I've got to find that stuff out. That is how I deliver a course. That's the quick and dirty version of how you teach someone something. If you can do everything I said here, you've done 90% of what it takes to get someone to learn something. 90%. Yes, there is 10% that can make a big difference in some cases. As I said with the doctor example earlier, missing someone with meningitis is a pretty big deal when you said they had a cold. So, that 90% means there's 10% off. And yes, I'm completely making up that 90% number. But you get my point. It's I can teach someone the big picture part, right? So let's recap. You got to gain the learner's attention. You got to tell them their goals. You got to reactivate what they know. Then you got to teach them. How do you do that? You deliver the content. You get them to memorize. You have them apply. You have them problem solve. Finally, we evaluate the learners and we evaluate what we did. That's it. That's simple, right? All right, get to it. Let me know how it works. Later, all.